The day I found out about my husband's affair, the world didn't stop. It kept moving. Cars sped down the streets, the sun cast golden rays through my kitchen window, and the scent of freshly brewed coffee lingered in the air. But inside me, something broke. I stood frozen in the doorway of our bedroom, my phone clenched so tightly in my hands that my knuckles turned white. The message was right there. I read it again and again, hoping, praying that somehow I had misunderstood. Last night was incredible. I can't stop thinking about you. I couldn't breathe. My heart pounded against my ribs, a mixture of rage, disbelief, and devastation clawing at my chest. My fingers trembled as I scrolled further. There were more. Flirty texts, inside jokes, late-night messages that no married man should be sending. And then, the worst one, I wish I could wake up next to you instead. A sharp, suffocating pain gripped my throat. This wasn't just a mistake. This wasn't just a drunken slip-up. This was love. Or at least he thought it was. I felt like I was going to be sick. My legs barely carried me as I stumbled into the bathroom, my stomach twisting violently. How could he? How could he do this to me? The door creaked open behind me. "Hey, babe," Ethan's voice filled the air as he walked in, stretching his arms as if this was just another normal morning. I lifted my head and turned slowly. My breath was ragged, my vision blurred with rage and unshed tears. He froze when he saw my face, his brows furrowed. "What's wrong?" I let out a breathless, bitter laugh. "Really? You're going to ask me that?" His gaze flickered to the phone in my hand, and everything changed. His shoulders tensed, his face drained of color, his lips parted, but no words came out. I stepped closer, my pulse roaring in my ears. I held up the screen, shoving it in his face. "Who is she?" My voice trembled, but I refused to break. Ethan blinked rapidly, his mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. He didn't even try to deny it. A harsh, bitter chuckle escaped my lips. "I see." He ran a hand through his hair, exhaling shakily. "It's not what you think. Not what I think." I cut him off, my chest heaving. "So what? Did your secretary just happen to fall into your bed? By accident." His jaw tightened. "It's complicated." Complicated? That word sent something snapping inside me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to hit him. I wanted to hurt him the way he had just shattered me. Instead, I did something else. I took off my wedding ring, the same ring I had cherished for years, the same ring I had believed meant something, and I threw it at his feet. Ethan flinched. "Fix this?" My voice cracked. "There's nothing left to fix." I turned on my heel and walked out, and I didn't look back. I didn't know where I was going. I just needed to get away. The streets blurred as I walked, my body moving on autopilot. My heart pounded in my chest, my breath shallow and ragged. How could this be happening? Ethan and I had built a life together, years of love, trust, and sacrifice, and he threw it all away for her. My stomach twisted. His secretary. I didn't even want to say her name. It felt like poison on my tongue. A sharp breeze stung my face as I walked into a nearby park. I sank onto a bench, gripping the edge so hard my fingers turned white. The weight of it all was crashing down on me now. I had left, walked out, tossed my wedding ring at his feet. And now I had nothing. Tears burned behind my eyes, but I refused to cry. Not here, not for him. Then my phone buzzed. I hesitated before looking at the screen. One missed call, Ethan. One new message, Ethan's mom. A bitter laugh escaped my lips. Of course. I clicked on the message. "We need to talk. Come over now." I closed my eyes. I already knew what this was about. Ethan must have called her, played the victim, and now his mother, his always perfect, always judgmental mother, wanted to talk. I should have ignored it. I should have turned off my phone and disappeared for a while. But instead, I went. Because if she wanted a fight, I was ready. Ethan's mother's house was exactly as I remembered. Cold, pristine, and unwelcoming. I stood at the doorstep for a moment, inhaling deeply, preparing myself for the storm. I already knew what was coming. Blame. Judgment. A mother defending her son, no matter what he had done. With a clenched jaw, I knocked. The door swung open almost instantly, as if she had been waiting. Margaret Whitmore stood there, arms crossed, her sharp eyes scanning me like a predator sizing up its prey. I forced a breath through my nose. "You wanted to talk?" She didn't step aside. "What have you done to my son?" I nearly laughed. "What have I done?" I repeated, shaking my head in disbelief. She scoffed, stepping back to let me in. "Come inside. I don't want the neighbors hearing this." I hesitated for a moment, because God knows I didn't want to be here. But I walked inside. The house smelled like expensive candles and freshly polished wood, but beneath it I could still sense the same icy atmosphere that had always made me feel unwelcome. Margaret walked into the living room, her heels clicking against the floor, then turned sharply to face me. "Ethan told me what happened. He's devastated." I crossed my arms. "Oh? Did he also tell you why?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "He told me you overreacted to something you found on his phone, and instead of handling it maturely, you threw a tantrum and stormed out." My fingers curled into fists. Overreacted. Threw a tantrum, like I was some child throwing a fit. "Did he tell you he was having an affair with his secretary?" I said, my voice sharp as a blade. Margaret didn't even blink. "I told him hiring that woman was a mistake," she muttered under her breath. I stiffened. That woman. She wasn't denying it. She knew. "You knew?" My voice wavered, but I refused to let it break. Margaret exhaled, as if this whole situation was inconvenient for her. "Listen, dear, men make mistakes. It's in their nature." I felt my stomach drop. "Excuse me?" She waved a hand dismissively. "He's a man. He works hard. He provides for you. Sometimes men stray. It doesn't mean he doesn't love you." I took a step back, horrified. "You actually believe that?" I whispered. She tilted her head, looking at me like I was naive. "Marriage isn't about love, dear. It's about compromise. You should have been more attentive. Maybe then he wouldn't have looked elsewhere." The words hit me like a slap. I had known Margaret was cold, distant, a woman who saw marriage as a business deal rather than a union of love, but I never thought she would actually blame me for her son's betrayal. I let out a hollow laugh, shaking my head. "So this is my fault?" Margaret lifted her chin. "You let yourself go." The air vanished from my lungs. My blood ran cold. For a second I couldn't even move, couldn't breathe. And then something inside me snapped. I stepped forward, my voice low and steady. "No, Margaret. Your son is a liar, a cheater. And the fact that you're standing here, defending him, tells me everything I need to know about where he learned it from." Her eyes darkened. "Watch your tone." "Or what?" I challenged, my voice rising. "Are you going to call him? Tell him to control his wife?" I let out a bitter chuckle. "Newsflash, Margaret. I'm not his wife anymore. I took off that ring and left. Because unlike you, I actually have some self-respect." Margaret's nostrils flared. "You think you can just walk away?" "I don't think," I shot back. "I know, and I already did." The silence between us was thick, heavy. But for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt powerful. She took a slow step forward, lowering her voice. "You will regret this." I smirked. "I regret ever marrying into this family. But walking away?" I let out a breath. "That's the best decision I've ever made." And then, without waiting for another word, I turned on my heel and walked out. For the last time, the moment I stepped out of Margaret's house, a weight lifted off my chest. For years I had endured her disapproving glances, her subtle insults, the way she always made me feel like I wasn't good enough for her son. And now finally I had spoken my truth. I had walked away. But as I got into my car, my hands shook against the steering wheel. Because where was I supposed to go now? Ethan had been my world for so long. We had built a life together, a home, a future, dreams. And now all of that was gone. I didn't even know who I was without him. The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had given up so much for this marriage. I had turned a blind eye when Ethan worked late nights. I had ignored the red flags. I had let myself believe in a love that, in the end, was never real. A tear slipped down my cheek, but I wiped it away furiously. Number no more crying over a man who never valued me. I took a deep breath, gripping the steering wheel. I needed to start over, and I knew exactly where to go. Arriving at my best friend's place, 15 minutes later, I pulled up in front of Mia's apartment. The moment she opened the door and saw my face, her eyes widened in shock. "What happened?" she gasped, pulling me inside. That was all it took. The dam broke. I collapsed into her arms, sobs racking through my body. "He cheated," I choked out. "Ethan, he's been sleeping with his secretary. And his mother, she blamed me." Mia froze, and then her body went rigid. She pulled back, her eyes blazing with fury. "He what?" I could barely nod before she let out a string of curses, so aggressive they could set a house on fire. Then before I could stop her, she grabbed her phone. "Who are you calling?" I sniffled. "A divorce lawyer." I stared at her. "Mia, She held up a finger. "Number no arguments. You are not staying married to that lying, cheating, manipulative son of a—" I couldn't help it. A small laugh escaped my lips. Mia paused, then smiled softly. "There she is." I wiped my tears, exhaling shakily. "I don't even know where to start." "You start by letting that scumbag go," she said firmly. "And then you remind yourself who the hell you are." I bit my lip. "I don't know who I am anymore," I whispered. Mia grabbed my hands, squeezing them tight. "Then let's find her together." The next morning, I woke up on Mia's couch, wrapped in a warm blanket, the smell of coffee filling the air. For a brief second, I forgot everything. Forgot the betrayal, forgot the lies, forgot that my marriage had just crumbled into nothing. But then reality came crashing down. I sat up slowly, rubbing my temples. My head was still heavy from all the crying, my body drained from the emotional storm of the last 24 hours. Then I heard Mia's voice from the kitchen. "Get up, sunshine. We've got a long day ahead," I groaned, leaning back against the couch. "Mia, I just had the worst day of my life. Can I at least have 5 minutes to be miserable?" She appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee, her expression dead serious. "Nope, we have work to do." I frowned. "Work?" Mia sat beside me, handing me a mug. "Listen to me. You are not going to sit here and cry over a man who didn't deserve you. You're not going to let his mother's disgusting words get inside your head. You, my love, are going to take your power back." I sighed, staring down at my coffee. "And how exactly am I supposed to do that?" Mia smirked. "We start by making sure you never, ever go back to him." She pulled out a stack of papers and placed them on the table. My heart dropped. Divorce papers. I stared at them, my hands feeling too heavy to move. I don't know if I can do this." My voice was barely above a whisper. Mia reached out, placing a hand over mine. "You already did the hardest part. You walked away. This question mark. This is just the final step." Tears burned in my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Because deep down, I knew she was right. I couldn't let Ethan win. I couldn't let his betrayal define me. I had to take control of my life again. I swallowed hard and picked up the pen. The moment my signature hit the paper, something shifted inside me. A weight I didn't even know I was carrying lifted from my chest. Mia grinned. "There she is." I let out a shaky breath. "Now what?" she smirked. "Now we make him regret ever letting you go." The moment the divorce papers were signed, something inside me changed. I wasn't the woman who cried over Ethan anymore. I wasn't the woman who let his mother's words break her. I was done being the victim. 1 week later, Ethan regrets everything. It didn't take long for Ethan to start calling. At first, it was just texts. "Can we talk?" "I miss you." "I made a mistake." I ignored them all. Then the calls started, every day, multiple times, until I finally picked up, not to forgive him, but to end it once and for all. "Ethan, stop calling me," I said, my voice steady, unshaken. He exhaled sharply. "Please, just hear me out." I didn't speak. "I messed up," he continued, desperation creeping into his voice. "I was stupid. I was selfish. And I lost the best thing in my life. I scoffed. You mean you lost control over me? His silence told me I was right. I shook my head. Ethan, you had a choice. You chose her. You chose to break our vows. You don't get to come back just because you regret it now. I love you, he whispered. I closed my eyes for a second, letting those words settle. At one point in my life, those words would have meant everything. But now they meant nothing. I took a deep breath and said the words that set me free. No, Ethan, you don't love me. You love the idea of me. You love the comfort I gave you, the loyalty I showed you. But you don't love me. Because if you did, you never would have done this. His breath hitched. Please. Goodbye, Ethan. And this time, I was the one who walked away. 3 months later, my revenge, living my best life. The best revenge is moving on. And that's exactly what I did. I found myself again. I started traveling, exploring the world I had once put on hold for my marriage. I started a new career, one where I thrived, where I didn't have to shrink myself to make a man feel powerful. I laughed more. I lived more. And Ethan? He had to watch it all from the sidelines. I heard from mutual friends that he was miserable, that he regretted everything, that his affair with his secretary had fizzled out as soon as the excitement wore off. And his mother? Margaret tried to reach out too. I guess she realized her perfect little son wasn't so perfect after all. I ignored her calls just like I ignored Ethan's, because I owed them nothing. Not an explanation, not forgiveness, nothing. And as I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, sipping a glass of wine, watching the sunset without a care in the world, I smiled. Because for the first time in my life, I was finally free.